Hello.
Okay, post 7.
Are we introducing ourselves?
Yeah,
sure.
I'm Emma. Emily.
Catherine.
Madeline. So what did you guys think of the videos of Crashin?
I think it's really great to listen to someone talk about theories when he's like an expert in it. Like he is like the leading edge in this field, and so it was really great to hear what he had to say. I think I gained a lot from what he said about comprehensible input and like making sure the input that you're providing or what you're teaching is understandable to the kids, and that really relates to scaffolding, it relates to Vygotsky, it relates to everything else. So, how about you guys? What do you think?
I thought it was, I really liked how he was so honest. I feel like a lot of times he said, yeah, I really believe this, and I'm really into grammar, but actually you don't really need much of it, and
it made him way more trustworthy to me.
Yeah, you could see how his thought process developed and how quickly things change, and how he said originally, you do half acquisition, half learning, and then they realized in practice that doesn't actually work, and research shows that what was it, that you don't even need
it's actually all learning. Acquisition.
Yeah. But I don't, what do you guys think about how he said you don't need to go be immersed? Said being immersed, you're going to learn, what did he say? You'll learn more in 2 days in a comprehensible input classroom environment
Than immersion.
I think that's true if you're starting at 0. Like, if I went to Japan right now and just immersed myself, it would take me a very long time to learn the language. Whereas if maybe I took a year or 2 of Japanese and then went to Japan.
Okay, yeah.
And
really
that's a
depends
place.
on you're building blocks.
Yeah, which is part of like the comprehensible input thing that he was talking about, where you kind of build up to being able to understand fluently other.
Your ZPD.
Yeah, totally.
I think to relate to what you guys had to say about Krashen, like a lot of researchers, I feel like you're not supposed to do this, but I feel like they do. They're like, I really think this is true, so I'm going to have these tests to prove what I think is true. But he had the opposite. Like, he was like, I think grammar is really important and, like, the fundamentals for language. And then he did all this research and was like, actually, like, social language is really important. And like, all these other aspects of language that he didn't think about before. So if he could be wrong, we could be wrong, too.
Yeah. I think also, though, I would struggle if I were learning another language and it was being taught to me, like, solely from, like, an acquisition framework. Like, I also want to know the structure of the language. I want to understand, how words are put together, how sentences are formed, and all of that. I kind of want that structural knowledge, but I don't know.
Yeah, what did he say about that? He said that it should be integrated, but I wasn't sure if he said you should do that through the second language. I don't remember what he said, because in the book we went through the different methods of learning language. But I don't think the book really had an opinion. Mostly it's stated. Yeah, what did you talk about in your section of the book?
I talked about the monitoring hypothesis, which helped explain different functions that acquisition and learning play. And
did you agree with it?
I thought it was interesting. I read this yesterday and I'm kind of blanking. Sorry. You guys can talk while I scan.
So, I have it kind of, maybe this will jog your memory, I just kind of wrote down like a little bit about it. Like the monitor hypothesis. So like acquisition is phonology, vocabulary, and syntax, while learning is editing or speech writing. So I think that learning is really important for being able to edit your speech or being able to like go back later with your written. And, so, did it say anything else about that? So I was just supposed to like briefly.
It kind of had a lot, like when Yvonne, is that his name?
Sure, go for it.
Applied the monitor during her oral exams for a doctorate, and Oh my gosh, I'm so tired. I'm so sorry.
You're fine.
She spent a lot of time. It was how you can't do both. You can't monitor the speaking. You have to sacrifice accuracy if you're going to monitor your speaking. And so she spent a lot of time during her doctorate thing trying to make sure that like her Spanish was correct. And so she was trying to make sure everything was proper, but she couldn't focus on both aspects of it. Does that make sense?
So I guess like if you focus more on grammar, you're going to miss the important part of picking up.
So you're going to sacrifice accuracy when you monitor while you're speaking. I thought that was crazy.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
And fluency.
Oh, that reminds me of something he was saying that I also thought was really cool and kind of obvious, but that
Something cool.
for like acquisition to really be like maximized, anxiety has to be at 0.
Yeah.
Which is like the anxiety I feel if I'm trying to speak in another language is like off the charts. And so I can't imagine like an ELL student, how do you reduce their anxiety in class? And it just, I don't know, emphasizes the importance of that.
Yeah, I remember I took Spanish in high school, and our teacher was always he's kind of funny because he was originally his first language is like French, and then he learned another language, and then he learned English, and then he learned Spanish, and he's our Spanish teacher, so I don't know what kind of accent we learned through him, but he was always like, don't talk in English, like, only Spanish, and to help us acquire the language, but it was, we're all teenagers and super self-conscious, and we would never speak, but looking back, like, he was doing all the right things, we just didn't have that basis of respect in the class.
But it's also hard, because if it was in high school, like, that's 45 minutes, then you just switch to all these other classes and you're speaking that language.
Yeah.
Then you go home for hours on end and not speaking that language. So it's hard to retain that.
It's almost like if I were going to go into a high school and teach another language, like I would share this with them. I'd be like, this is what the research has proven, and that's why we're going to do this. And at first you guys are going to feel anxious and nervous about speaking, but like, try and not, I don't know. Yeah. It's just like if somebody had told me that and laid out, like, people had researched this.
Yeah. I think I would have respected it more, not being like, oh, it's just a
just been more motivated to try
and... Teacher kind of did. She was this little petite white lady, and she came in, like, showing us, like, different facts, and then she's like, okay, it's going to be weird at first, but this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah. What did she teach?
Spanish. That was for Spanish.
And did you like her?
I loved her. She was my favorite, and, like, the other Spanish teachers we had were just, like, structured, and they weren't so... They didn't lay everything out like her, but I loved Spanish because of her, like...
That's cool.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes as a teacher you want to have, like, this wall where you're, like, have, like, the research to yourself and, like, the reasons why you're doing it, but, like, kind of sharing what you're thinking and why.
In some cases it works.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And then the students can be like, oh, they're not just trying to be... power hungry.
Or like put me on the spot and make me uncomfortable.
They're not trying to be mean, they're just trying to teach me. I think that's really good. Like, I think that'd be a great thing to do as a teacher. Be like, research has shown that that's what you should do.
That's why I'm doing this,
That's the base, that's like how he ended his video, right? He said the main thing, he continued to say this, I feel like, throughout the whole video. The one point I'm trying to get at is that he ended by saying that like teaching kids how to know how to acquire language is how they're going to best acquire language.
Yeah.
So I think...
It's a medical admission?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. 303. It's fun. What was it? One of these, I talked about how to bring in, like, context and comprehensible input is that you do need to have vocabulary and grammar, but... There's a big difference between just being able to know what the words are when you read them and how they're spelled and actually know what the context are when they're in a sentence.
Oh, yeah.
And so students can pass spelling tests with flying colors but not really know like what they mean. And so I think that's something that's really important for meaning and putting meaning behind the words that you're teaching.
It's kind of that it helps to know the rules, but it's essential to know when to apply them and when to concentrate more on the meaning of the message and not the rules.
Oh yeah, monitor hypothesis. Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Cool.
Sweet.
Do we want to talk about
like the interactionist versus, what was the other one? Or nativist? Did you guys see that as well?
I think that might have been just your letter,
Okay.
but that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Sure. I think I wasn't totally clear on nativist, but interactionist is that you believe that a mixing of all cultures and that the conflict helps provide better understanding, and that there's like a idea that there's a healthy form of conflict, and so like between cultures, between languages, and so you have to have both to be able to then understand both. Did I explain that correctly, or like is it still confusing?
how is that used in the classroom?
No, it's okay. I should be that. Is that through the conflict you could better understand their point of view, and because if you don't conflict and you don't talk about different things, or if you don't, and conflict is not necessarily bad.
Okay.
It's not.
So you're trying
like,
to come to an understanding,
Yeah.
but there has to be a misunderstanding for that to happen.
Yeah, there has to be some differences to be able then to be like, oh, why do you think that? And then you can change your input or change your way of communicating to your students or to your peers or to your other teachers about why you're doing what you're doing. And to be honest, I'm still a little confused on what nativist is. I think that might just be that, maybe the opposite of interactionist. So more individual and not about how things interact. But I believe that just to form a more richer identity in anything, in language or like your personal identity, you need to have interactions with others, languages, like cultures, people. So.
That reminds me a lot of something I read. So it was Schumann, who was, so he has this idea of social distance and how it affects, second language acquisition. And it was like, the more there's a power dynamic between the two culture groups, the more social distance there is, and the less likely it is that you'll pick up the language quickly. Or the more, like there were all these different sections of it, and it was like 8 different things. But things like that, things like how often you have daily interactions with people, native speakers of the language. Yeah, that's what it is. So let's see. So social dominance. Social dominance refers to the power relationships between two groups. And so social distance is greatest when one group dominates the other. And then like how similar the cultures are, the size, like comparisons of the culture, how like similar their values are.
This is this is just why some languages have more power than others, or?
Oh no, sorry. It's like the environments in which you would be more or less likely to acquire the other language.
Oh, okay.
So if you are trying to learn the language of a dominant culture group that has dominated your culture group, then there's more distance. There's more social distance, and you're less likely
To want
to reach fluency in that language. And then so there's
That was the example of Alberto, who worked in a factory, and so he was working with a bunch of other people that spoke the same language as him, and he didn't have much contact with the people higher up that spoke English, and so he had no desire to learn English. He just continued working with his peers.
So that would be maybe an example of enclosure. Social distance is increased when the learner group is self-sufficient.
I think that also ties in, I think this ties into language and a lot of other things too, like race and ethnic relations, but if you don't see someone that is like you speaking that language that you're learning, or someone or some of your race or cultural background, and like a place like if you don't see any woman teachers, or if you don't see any African American teachers, then that's not going to be something you aspire to.
Yeah.
Or if you don't see any people speaking English that are like in your personal bubble. What's it like? Meso system.
Right. 303.
Yeah.
That was this one too, though.
So then you're not going to or want to or be able to get proficient.
I think that would be how that connects to everything that you guys just talked about is part of the affective filter. I don't know if that word was specifically for languages, but it was the barrier between the comprehensible input and then your learning center, the acquisition centers of your brain. And so he said specifically like being self-conscious or not being motivated, and all those would be examples of that. Like if you don't see people,
So barriers.
if you're not don't see people that represent you in your culture, then you don't see any motivation to become that, and
Usually, possibility.
then it becomes one of those filters. And I guess that wouldn't be anxiety. I guess they're two different things. Motivation.
I wouldn't want to learn it if only the people above me would actually learn English. There would be a lot of social anxiety. If you started speaking English, you'd be like, why are you trying to be like
And
the
then you have
boss?
anxiety, and then you wouldn't have any motivation to do it again because that was a traumatic experience.
It's kind of a loop.
That's a negative cycle.
So what are things that we could do as teachers to reduce anxiety and try and limit the effect of those barriers?
That's a good question.
I talked a lot about how, like, I really think it's important to create a safe environment in the classroom, and so that I think it's how you direct discussions as a teacher, because I've been in some classes where the teacher will be like, almost, and when you say your answer, and
it's like really not.
it really, it really hurts your feelings, and you're like, everybody's judging me now, and so if the teacher say, I like that point, can you elaborate on that? It's important for the teacher to build that safe zone where every answer is correct, and I think that takes a ton of skill as a teacher, but it's super beneficial, especially for ELL students, where to have that experience of them being really close and being like that, seeing their strengths and their assets, and then bringing that in, so they still have that positive affirmation, and building confidence.
So true.
And like the more positive experiences they have speaking English, the more likely they're going to keep trying.
Well, if they never feel like they're failing, then
If you think of language as like a subject in school, like for me, math has been such a struggle, I think, because I've had multiple teachers that have just been really destructive. Like
same.
You raise your hand and they're like, nope, that's not even close. So you like put an answer on the board and they're like, okay, that's an example of not to do it. And you're like,
I hated that.
okay, like why do I want to try if I'm going to fail?
Yeah.
Like it just ends up being a negative cycle. So if that's how it works with math, then it's gonna work like that.
The math teacher who just gave up on me.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know how to explain this to you. Like, I can't explain this to you. And I was like, okay, well, I'm dropping pre-calc tomorrow.
Yeah, and then for those kids that are ELLs, like, they can't.
You can't give up on them. And they
Can't
can't.
understand your peers or what your teacher's saying.
They're giving up on you.
Yeah.
Drop school.
So I guess I can
do.
see how
Yeah.
it's true. Yeah, I think I can see with that negative effect and that subject with teachers. Like if I was like that with ELL students, if I was like, well, I can't explain it to this kid, or like, or like, that was kind of correct in your language, or like saying like things that are like not even like affirming. How would they want to try or come to school? So I think that's a good point. Being like affirming.
Yeah. It'd be hard not speaking their language though, and then you could just, I feel like there will be, I can envision that there will be a point where you just feel so much tension because you're both aware of this big language barrier between the two of you, and you both want to tear it down and you can't, and it's really sad, and you just got to work really hard at it.
I guess.
Know that you're in it together.
Yeah, I guess instead of like tearing it down, you can figure out a way to keep that language and to build another one as well.
Yeah.
Did you guys read the sign language article?
Yeah. I honestly, like, I don't know. It would have never really have occurred to me that sign languages wouldn't be a real language. So it's like, why are you so serious? I mean, I guess, there are people who, I guess don't.
Yeah. Every time I read something like that where I'm like, well, this is obvious. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I guess it wasn't obvious to someone.
Yeah.
It's like when you see someone on a rule where it's just like, don't throw this ridiculous thing like into the swimming pool, and you're like, I guess someone had to do that.
Yeah, somebody must have done that.
For this to be a rule. And so it's the same thing with things like this. I'm like, well, I've always thought like sign language was a legitimate language.
Yeah, I was kind of taken aback when I read the question. Is it? Oh my gosh! Like, have I thought wrong? Am I what?
It is interesting though that the steps in acquiring sign language are so parallel with the steps for acquiring a spoken language.
Yeah.
I think that's
Like
cool.
hand dabbling. That's so cool.
Like where you're just like why?
Like baby talk with your hands.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
And I don't remember correct me, I don't remember, I took a linguistics class before, and we watched this really cool video where these kids who are deaf, like from this one country, I don't remember what it was, but they hadn't had any institution for deaf kids, or they couldn't support them in schools and stuff like that. So they finally someone was like, this isn't right, we need to create a school for them. Do you know what I'm talking about or no?
No,
but keep describing it. Sounds great.
It sounds really interesting.
Okay, so they ended up like gathering all these kids up and putting them in a school, and they were going to start teaching them sign language.
Like standard sign language.
Yeah. And they actually ended up creating their own sign language. Like the kids just created their own. They just created their own language because
they had to.
Yeah, and they were just kids. Like there was no self-consciousness because they were all in the same boat, and they've never had kids that were like them before. And so I wish I could find the video because it's so cool. And they were just constantly talking with their hands, and they totally got it. And it was pretty sure the professors are like, well, didn't know this was gonna happen. Yeah. And then they kind of started studying.
Does that remind you of, remember 310 last spring, Kate was talking about
Greenland?
Yeah, she was somewhere with all these other international professors who, a lot of them had children who all spoke different languages, but they hung out together all day, and they made their own language that their parents couldn't understand.
I was like, what?
My mind.
I think that gives you a little hope too. If you're like, how is this ELL student going to excel? It's like, well, if students can create their own sign language or like create their own language, like it's possible. Like, it's going to be difficult, but
well, sign language had to start somewhere. Like
that's so cool, and it also just gives you like, children are so intelligent, and I feel like a lot of times you don't give them enough credit.
Yeah.
They're brilliant.
Just in general, I think it's really cool that we have this already set, like, language acquisition.
Yeah.
I don't know, that kind of, it's not what you're learning in school. Like, you come with a little bit. And
like, it's innate.
Really cool.
Yeah. I also listened. Yeah. I thought it was kind of interesting because I thought that as adults, like, you hit that point where you can't. I thought there was a point where you can't acquire language as well.
I think that's a myth. I don't think that's...
I don't know if maybe it's like you stop learning as well.
Yo, definitely. There's like a zone of language acquisition that's like, I think it's like up to 10 or 12 that like optimally, but then after that it starts getting worse, but it's still possible.
It's going to be more difficult, but it's still possible.
Yeah. And it would make sense that you're acquiring a language if you go to another country and you're picking up on stuff, but you're not picking up. You're not seeing like, oh, that's a syntactic order.
Yeah, true.
So I guess it would make sense, but it's kind of interesting that I wonder. Yeah, even if you're super old, you probably still learn.
I think so. I have
That's
enough
what I'm
open
going to do when I
humanity.
retire.
Move around, learn languages. That's cool.
Okay, this is kind of maybe a tiny bit off topic, but do you guys think it is, well, based on what we know about like learning grammar versus acquisition, do you think teaching grammar even just in elementary school to like the whole class teaching just English grammar, is that something that is worthwhile or something that should be less prioritized than it is?
My English class felt pointless. We made like trees,
Mm-hmm.
and it made no sense. Cause maybe my teacher didn't explain the importance of it, but I
Yeah.
don't know.
I think it was also maybe just how my brain is, but I remember I took a difference between AP Lit and AP Lang for me. Like AP Lit, I was like, yeah, like I get this, like context, like oh yeah, and then Lang I was like grammar and like the in-depth like grammatical structures of everything, and it was just like I don't think I gained much from it.
Yeah,
Like
especially dividing both of them up. It's
Yeah.
like maybe if you had been taught
Yeah.
grammar or the language with the literature.
Yeah, that's what I remember. I was thinking about that while I was taking it, and I was like, this would be helpful if I was reading something, but because I'm just learning about these like very specific things, I have nothing to like relate it to.
Yeah.
And so then it was just totally separate. So I think if you you can teach grammar, but it just has to have context.
Have something
Yeah.
related to it.
So then you think about like when you're teaching like when you're learning it in a Spanish class and you're only learning grammar, you could see how that's just not very effective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing, I think he was talking about, I don't know if he talked about it in a video, I think he did, or about how like language classes, how they would have like a week of like present tense and like a week of past,
Yeah.
a week of whatever. It's like that's not how the world is. Like the world is like all of those things at once. Like, we can talk about what I did yesterday, what I'm doing today, what I'm doing tomorrow, all today.
You can add context, like Yvonne or whatever her name is. She's I'm done with this. Let's talk about meatballs. Because it meant something to the kids.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And I guess like part of comprehensible input, I remember my Spanish teacher was really awesome. He'd say like tiburon, and that's like a shark, I'm pretty sure. And so we had all these different. He made it really visual, and
That's cool.
I think it added some context, and we all remember.
My Spanish that stuck with me was the songs.
Yeah.
Songs were really
yeah.
strong for me. Like
The poems that I
if I
learned
see
in
a day
French.
of the week in Spanish, I immediately like hop into the song of the week. Like
That's cool.
it's weird.
So it's got to be differentiated too, because I hated songs.
Oh really?
So it's important
I
to
love
teach it in
them.
all different ways.
Yeah. We had like, I remember we had these video projects where we had to like, I don't know how much I got out of this, but it was fun. Like we,
Oh yeah.
in Spanish, we were supposed to like take a Spanish song and then lip sing it and have like a video of it, and then like the people in class, like we had all the lyrics and they were supposed to listen to the song and like feel in the words for it while we like were playing our video.
I think we did something very
I think
similar.
it was fun. You got
Yeah, it
something
was
out
fun.
of it.
Something stuck with you.
Yeah, I don't know about the language, but I remember I was like a gangster.
Lessons.
in this dumpster.
I can picture it. Gangster cat.
Yeah, it was pretty.
Yeah,
With my friend.
you'd want to make sure that for your elementary school kids that they were able to have fun with the language, because they're so. I'm sure you feel a lot of pressure for them to learn now, because they're every time they're not in the class with their peers, they're not learning the material. But you gotta have fun too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would play lots of different games with whiteboards, with like,
Oh, I like
where you would
whiteboards.
separate into teams, and like we had to fill out different things in Spanish. I thought it was like the way she did it was pretty applicable.
Just
Another thing. Oh, sorry.
sorry, I was just imagining being the one Spanish-speaking student that didn't speak English,
Okay.
or like being one English-speaking student in a Spanish classroom. It's not as easy as having an entire classroom of kids learning.
It's true.
Just,
Yeah, it's like the only thing I can relate to is like all of us learning
Yeah.
language, but that's very
but you
different
can't
than
relate
their
as the
scenario.
one person.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
That's good.
What were you gonna
Sorry,
say?
go on.
Oh, I don't even know. Oh, yeah. Another thing in his video, he mentioned In Canada, they'll do French immersion. And I know people who have been through it,
My cousins.
just through my camp and stuff. Yeah, and they're fluent in French. You know, like it was. I think it started middle school, and like they took just like 3 or 4 subjects, but it was all in French. And I guess they must have had enough background in French for that to be comprehensible to them. But I don't know. It's hard because I am not bilingual, but if that was even a prerequisite for being a teacher, maybe I would try harder, you know? I don't know. It's just, I feel like we could do more than what we do.
You're saying like you think that to be an ELL teacher you need to go through the process of learning a language.
No, I don't, like, not necessarily, but I think it would help. And I think, I don't know, like, everyone benefits from knowing other languages.
And to be in that experience like we're doing in math right now, to learn like X-mania, a whole new
See, I don't even know what that is. We didn't go over that in math class.
Oh, well, we basically have to do a whole new number system and do all the mathematic things and that. And it's
we're learning different bases.
Yeah, and it's kind of, it's intimidating.
Yeah. Like alien thing. Cool. Stephanie was trying to explain it to me.
And
I just like couldn't wrap my head around it.
Yeah, it's just to make you feel like a second grader. Like, how are you supposed to know how this system works? And then I think it would be really, that's why I think it's super great that we have the opportunity to go study abroad and stuff. Yes. Then we're going to be in a situation if we go to Mexico where we are going to be in a totally...
Are you planning on doing that?
Yeah.
Wait, all the summer?
Oh, yeah, I would love to do this.
Really?
Sorry, off topic completely, but I think we should totally all do that.
That'll be part of it, because then we'll be able to be in that experience where we'll be able to teach English, and I haven't had an experience to teach.
I think it would be amazing.
Language, yes.
Yeah, I haven't either. I think calling my mom and I was like, how cool would this be?
Well, I should bring it up.
Okay, well, should we, anything else you want to cover before we end this discussion?
I think we've covered
I don't have anything. I think we covered like all of it.
Comprehensible input is important, which is sign language is a language. But also with output as well. So you like have to value their output if they're valuing your input. So if their output is not exactly what you're expecting, or like not exactly correct, like be affirming.
Yeah. That's a good point.
So, all right.
Cool.
I think it's good.
Well, good night.
Oh, jeez. Yours.
Oh, yeah, thanks.